Okay, welcome to the Art Lady channel. Today we're going to be doing a fall picture and we're going to be focusing on some fall colors in our pumpkin, and we're going to learn about color value, and we're going to learn about dry brush techniques. And dry brush is basically keeping your brush pretty dry, not mixing it and dipping it in water in between colors. So we want to be able to blend wet on wet color. Wet on wet color, but yet we keep our brush pretty dry. And if you have a little paper towel handy just to carry with you, that helps when you're switching out color. Now for this lesson, it's our beginning dry brush lesson. We're going to start with light values and then work our way up to dark. And that kind of makes sense when we go from color to color. If you start with light values and go up, it's not going to dirty the next color. But we're going to start off with a background, and this background paper I chose to be blue, but I also have some fun other colors on my counter as well. We have some dark purple, and then this purpley, another darker shade of purple. It's almost like it's a purple made with a little bit of black put in for that color. So if you're picking it up on the internet, you might not see it, but it's like a shade, a very dark shade of purple. So we're going to go in and we're just using tempera paint today. Some of it is premium grade, some of it is student grade, and we're going to be going to the top of our page. Now if you're doing it in a classroom situation, you want to make sure you put your class on the back of your paper. You want to make sure you put your name on the back, and in my classroom their table number as well. So we're going to find the top center. Now that our name is on the back, and we're just going to drop down a little bit, and I'm going to put a little guideline of white. And this is centered, side to side, centered. And I'm going to go really quick. The next step is to take your brush, and we're using a flat brush, and I'm making a circle, letting the hairs just drag right behind. And then I'm going to lightly fill in that circle. You can see how it shows up nicely with that dark, beautiful, gorgeous, dark shade of purple or violet. Another name for purple is violet. My friends with me today are 5th grade friends. So now the next step is to take, now we've got our circle, so think about the process. A simple circle near the top, but leaving at least a finger. The next step is I'm coming down and I'm just directly under the circle, and I'm going to make, with my brush, I'm going to just draw a letter C. Then from there, I'm going to go on the other side of the circle, and I'm going to make a U shape. But notice the U, it goes down, and it's not a full complete U, is it? I didn't draw all the way up the other side. Now I'm just going to simply connect the two. And now I'm tipping my brush sideways so you can see it on the video. The best way to use these brushes is straight up or at a slight angle. Okay, it's my hand. Sometimes if I do it too high up, my hand blocks. And you're going to smooth out this bird. Smooth out the shape. Now, I'm going to join the two circles together. I'm going to join the two. So watch, I'm coming off of this circle because I don't want this big space in between. I want it to be gently, and then I'm just going to bring it right down. But I want to give definition of head, body. And now I'm going to blend it out so that I don't have any thick paint. Smooth it out. And from there, I'm just going to print some tails. So I'm taking my flat brush, just giving a press, press and draw, press and draw, and press and draw. I'm going to redo this one a little. There. Just so it's a little bit longer. And smooth out anything. I'm going to go back over and smooth it out again. Now I'm going to give that a little bit of dry time. And from here, I'm going to skip about 2 fingers, and then I'm ready to start my pumpkin. So I'm going to mark with my brush, and now I'm going to go into the orange values. And from here, I'm going to start off with a straight line down, just to give some guidelines. And I'm going to go around, and I'm going to go around on the other side. And from here, I'm going to come down and go from down, curve out, go to the middle. down, curve around, and go back to the middle. These are going to be the veins or the actual like grooves in the pumpkin. And if you need to make it a little bit wider, you can extend it and make it bigger. I'm going to extend this, make it a little bit wider. And now I want my strokes, well, I fill this in. I'm going to first fill it in with one value. But I want my brush strokes to come down and around. This is how I want my strokes to go. Down and around and curve, down and around. Follow those groove lines as you're painting. So I'm basically painting long lines, then coming back and smoothing like this, around and around. I want long brush strokes so that the streaks in the paint show up in my direction. Now I'm going to go back and forth this way. Now once this is done, this is going to be a base coat. But this first base coat, which is this base coat, it needs time to dry before I can streak it with some other colors. Okay? So I'm going to let that dry a bit, and now I'm going to work up my stem. And for the stem, I'm going to come off the top of the pumpkin. I can lighten it up a little bit with some orange paint. And now notice I didn't wash the brush, and then I'm going to come over. It's kind of like a tipped over L or a horizontal line, and then come straight down. And I'm going to paint in my pumpkin stem. Now if you want to give it a little curl or a flip on the end, you can flip it on the end. And then I'm going to switch to a very skinny brush, and I'm going to do some of these lines here, which is some of the veining. And I will show you that, and then I will stop this and let you go do this. This is going to come out. These are the pumpkin vines. So I'm coming out from the pumpkin, and I've dipped in white first. And then I'm going to go up and around and do a spiral. I'm going to dip in white so you can see. Up and around. And it's going to be kind of a square spiral. And these are the pumpkin veins. I mean the vines. Then this is going to come out and down. And I'm going to make a vine here. Just draw with that brush. We're going to do several layers. I'm going to draw just so you can see it with the white, and then I'll fill in green and brown. And you're going to draw in the leaves, come out from the pumpkin and down. Then you can put a leaf in. And the leaves are, if you do a straight line, you can come out and back, out and back. It's kind of a diamond. And then just connect. And then do wherever you want to see a spiral. Instead of doing a circular spiral, if you want to do circular, you can. But in this particular design that I'm kind of copying, that I was inspired by, it has this more angular vine, which I like, that stylized vine. And then once you have the vine done, you can go and layer with some values of green. But I'm going to stop here. I'm going to let you get this far, and then the next part you'll be able to see, we'll be able to finish this together. If you want to continue watching, just let it run and play. Otherwise, we stop here, get this much done, and then you can continue with me. Okay, we are now going to finish our pumpkin with values. You can see all the different kinds of values here we're going to be adding. The lights and darks of orange, and then we'll be finishing up our bird and then adding a lot of different values to our vines and our leaves. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to be using a small round brush, and we're going to just put in some detail on our bird. I'm going to start off by doing a tiny little beak. I'm going to take some and only put a very little bit into the brush here on my tip. And I'm going to visualize where I want my beak to go. I don't want to go out too far. And you can see that's more of a student grade paint, so I'm getting some some transparent color. So I'm going to go into this orange, see if I can get a little bit more opaque color. Sometimes if the paper shows through, then just give it a time to dry. and then just do another coat. My white worked out really well. I'm going to give a little bit more of this darker orange then, see if this helps. I'll just give that another coat. So I'm going to let that dry, and then I'm going to give it another coat. And sometimes even when it dries, it becomes more opaque. When it's wet, it leaves a little bit of transparent look, but you want it to be even though. You don't want any streaks in it. There's my little beak, and it's a long triangular shape, elongated triangular shape. Now I'm going to go in and do my eye. And I'm going to put very small amount of brown on my brush. I'm going to take this and I'm going to dry it off here like that, just to remove any extra paint on my brush. And before I actually do the brown, I'm going to give a little bit of, since this has been drying, I'm going to put a little bit of white down to re-moisten this white area. And just give another coat of white. I want to put a little wing on here, so I want that to be a little bit wet near my wing, near the center of the bird, and then down and around in this area. I'm going to kind of give a slight outline to that brown, with that brown. Now that's up to you. If you choose not to do an outline, you don't have to. If you're using a nice dark shade of color like this purple, you don't really necessarily need to even do any outline. I'm going to again do the dry brush technique where I find a clean area and just wipe any excess paint off. If you only dip in, and when I go in, I just barely, what I tell the kids is I barely kiss the paint, barely touch the surface of that paint, so that I have almost no paint on that brush. Let me come up close so you can see. See that? And then I'm going to rest my hand, because remember this is dry, and I'm going to barely find the center and then barely touch to give a little tiny eye right in there. Now I'm going to really carefully, and if you again hold it up straight, you're going to get a better line, but so that you can see what I'm doing, I'm tipping it down. And I'm just kind of grazing the surface, resting my hand and just grazing the surface just to give some value in here. And then when I blend it with some dry brush technique, you'll get a little bit of different values. It'll kind of mix. Now I'm going to wipe my brush, so very carefully. Now that was almost no brown. I'm wiping my brush so it's dry, and because I had re-moistened the white paint, I can then just kind of scooch around these edges and give it a little rough texture, just kind of blending the edges in, and it blends itself in nicely. When I do oil painting, I do it in this fashion. I put the white down first, and then I just blend in my colors. That's a technique that I really like to do. Okay, so there's the bird now, and be careful not to mess up that eyeball. And while I have my dark out, I'm going to go ahead and just do some little narrow. Now you don't want your legs to be way over on one side, way over here. You kind of want it to be centered on that bird, and do just very tiny, thin little lines coming down. 1 and 2. And if you want to do a little bit of the little claws, you can. You don't have to put too much of this detail in. Some little curved claw lines. I'm going to wipe that brown off my brush. See how I'm doing it? Now, whenever I wipe off this, I am not smashing and stirring my brush. I do not want to ruin that beautiful tip. You always want that tip to form the hairs to form a nice point. I'm just going to kind of clean up these edges here where they hit, where it went over on my white. Now I'm going to work up some values in my pumpkin. Right now I have a medium values. So I want to streak it, and I'm going to switch back to my bigger brush because this is a larger area than my hand. So I want to use a bigger brush. I want to start adding and I want to keep those streaks. Start adding some values, some darker values. Right now, I have some yellow-orange color right here. I have some red, I have some red-orange color, and then I have orange. So I take orange to make yellow-orange, and this color has more yellow added. So it is, I'll show you in the order. So this is more yellowy than the medium orange, and this one is more red than the medium orange. So there's my yellow orange, red orange, and orange. Those are called intermediate values. So I want lots of values in my pumpkin. Values of orange, and then I can even put some browns in. So I'm going to streak this now with some darker value. This is red orange coming down, and then doing darker red orange down the middle. And to create this veining effect, I take my very skinny brush of brown, and I'm doing some very thin brown lines. And again, this is pretty dry, these brushes. Slight curve, slight curve. Oops, I just dropped that brush, it went crazy. All right. And then I'm going to do another one on this edge here. And if you want to do one here, on this pumpkin I had some lopsided, and just this gives it more natural look. And I can even add, if I want to add another little bump right here, this will be a back bump. Because whenever I go to the pumpkin patch, there's always some that are more lopsided than others. And it just makes it a little bit more artistic. You don't want it to be perfectly rounded. And then if you've ever looked at the bottom, the pumpkins kind of come down, and this is a little bit narrow here. This from here to here, it appears to be narrow, and this kind of dips in. And I'm going to come around. Now that I have a dark on my brush, I'm going to add some darker lines under the stem. And this flares out here where it hits the main pumpkin. And I did a little bit of dark on this side too. And some dark at the opening. And I'm going to just do some random dry lines here, coming down. Now I'm going to take my cloth and wipe that brush to remove a lot of that. I remember I dropped it and it dipped in too far. So I got a little mess on my brush. I don't want all that paint on there. Now with this wider brush, I'm going to go next to those brown lines. And because this is construction paper, it's absorbing my tempera really nicely and fast. So that's good. And I'm not putting loads of tempera on. You don't want to have puddles on your paper. And I'm going in the direction down and around, keeping the same long strokes because I want my lines to be long and blend in. And by layering the colors on top, you see how this is picking up and blending? It's a nice tacky feeling of this paint as it's drying so that it's able to blend enough without puddling. And I'm only putting small amounts on. If I did thick wads and thick puddles, it's not going to blend as nicely as what it's doing. And I can streak it even with some lighter values too down here and lay the color right on like this. Lay some of the brighter areas. And I want brighter areas to be toward the middle. Now I'm laying my bright areas, you can see. Brighter areas toward the middle where the light is going to shine and hit that pumpkin. And then as it comes in, and of course these are the grooves of the pumpkin where it's darker. And then where the pumpkin comes down toward the bottom, this is going to be more shadows. So I can wipe my brush and take some of this red and red-orange color. I don't want puddles on there. And I can lay some of this darker values. And I'm just kind of wiping the color on. Now, I'm never stirring because I want to keep this same curve. I want my brush strokes to be in this nice curve. You want to be able to see the different colors. You don't want them to be stirred all together. And the tip of the pumpkins here. You can even put some more brighter where it's going to show more light. And I want to bring some of this light and highlight into this stem too, so I'm just going to hit some of that color in here. And I lay the colors on top. It kind of reminds me of Impressionism, where they do dabs of different colors. But I wanted this to be very painterly. So I'm mixing in my color like this and laying it and keeping my strokes in the direction of the pumpkin, coming down and around, down and around. Now I'm going to show you how I finished off the leaves here and the veins. I mean the vines. I don't know why I keep on saying veins. That's what happens when you get old. I'm going to lay some color and I lay it down and I leave it. I'm not stirring. And I'm just kind of blending this in. I'm giving light value and dark. So I'm putting some light value here, and on the other side, can you see both greens? Yeah. And I'm laying the darker green up on one side here.
Good afternoon, teacher.
And now I'm going to show you how to do the wing. And the wing, because I forgot to do that, is just a straight line down and kind of curve it around. Down and around. And I kind of like it that rough look, that dry brush technique. And then I can dry my brush, clean it, and hit just the edge with some of this white. Not too much now. Cleaning that brush again, pulling off, oh, got too dirty. I'm going to lay some white on top of there and just blend it in a little. I keep on drying that brush in my hand. Anywhere where I want to clean it up. Let me have some more. I want more white up in here. And there is the little wing added to it. Okay, now I'm going to continue. And I'm going to add light greens and yellow greens to the vines of the pumpkin. And I'm going to fill in here. I can remember as kids growing pumpkins. My dad had a huge, gorgeous garden. It was so beautiful. It was on the side of a dirt road that people would stop, strangers, and say, and ask, how do you do that? That's how beautiful it was. Okay, so we're going to continue with these laying of color going into both. And I'm retracing my vines. I got it right that time. The vines of the pumpkin. And again, you can add your own twist to this. If you want to do some, you know, some more on the ends and flip it up this way. And even putting, some people like to put little, in folk art, they like to put little dots on the ends like this. That kind of gives me the feeling that it's continuing to grow. And another technique of to do tiny dots is using even the back end of your brush. Not putting much in. Just, this kind of gives me the feeling that, yeah, it's continuing. It's an endless vine. Or even to add more pattern to it. You want to put some of these little dots here on. And that's how you would work up your pumpkin. You want to just keep on. Now, once this is dry, mine looks a little bit dark. Once it's dry, you assess it, and if you want to fix it or adjust it, even putting a little bit of the yellow green in here too, that can be gorgeous because the pumpkin hasn't quite churned yet, or it's just reflecting some color. And even bringing out some highlights if you're really careful with your white. You want to clean your brush off real good before you go into that white. And then you can blend in some lighter values here for little bits of highlight. And blend. And if you want to put, now my stem is quite dark, so I might put some real dry. I took that white, dried it off. See how I'm doing the dry brush? You dry off most of that paint, just hit some edges and kind of flick in to give some, make that stem look old. I'm going to do some down this edge to bring some highlight into it there. And then give a little bit of, I want a little bit lighter here too. And kind of just lay that highlight on that white pumpkin. And that can lighten up your colors too. Sometimes the white helps to blend with this paint to make it less transparent too. And then now I'm losing some of my, the more you play with it, sometimes you start losing some lines. So don't feel like you can't go back in. So I can go right back in now if I'm losing some of these shadows and grooves in the pumpkin, and then I can just blend it back in. And then if you want to do a more dramatic outer line in here, you can on some of the edges, even on your in your veins, the veins of the leaves, and a shadow at the bottom in here too to help define. You can come back in. Ouch. There we go. We flew on the floor there. And even a shadow on the bottom here too. See? See how that looks dry? That's a dry brush technique. My brush is dry, and I have a little bit of this paint here, and I'm laying it on. There. It's kind of more of an acrylic. And there you have your pumpkin with a little hidden, with a little friend sitting on top.